My daughter-in-law ripped the microphone from my hands at her pregnancy announcement party and told the entire room I wasn't welcome to be a grandfather. "This baby doesn't need someone like you in its life," she announced, her designer dress gleaming under the crystal chandelier. Guests gasped. Some laughed nervously. I stood there, 63 years old, holding nothing but the speech I'd spent weeks writing for my future grandchild. What she didn't realize was that her own father had just stepped through the front door. When he saw me standing there, humiliated and speechless, his face went white as chalk. "Dear God," he whispered loud enough for the whole room to hear. "Captain Morrison?" The woman who had just tried to erase me from her family's future was about to learn that some debts can never be repaid. Have you ever been publicly humiliated by someone who was supposed to love you? Share your story in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Your experience might help someone going through something similar. The day my son called to tell me he was getting married, I was underneath a 1987 Ford pickup, replacing a transmission in my small garage in Bakersfield, California. Grease on my hands, sweat on my brow, classic country playing on the radio that had seen better days. "Dad, I met someone," my son said, his voice carrying that particular excitement I hadn't heard since he got accepted to Stanford. "Her name is Melissa. She's everything I never knew I wanted." I slid out from under the truck, phone pressed to my ear, heart swelling with a joy I couldn't quite name. My boy, my Daniel, the kid I'd raised alone since his mother passed when he was 4 years old. The boy who used to hand me wrenches before he could pronounce their names. The young man who'd worked his way through college while I took every construction job I could find to help pay his tuition. "Tell me about her, son. She's a marketing executive at a tech company, Stanford MBA. Her family's in real estate development. Dad, she's brilliant and beautiful and—" He paused. "I really want you to meet her." Something in his hesitation made my stomach tighten, but I pushed it aside. My boy was happy. That was all that mattered. The wedding happened fast. 6 months of planning that somehow never included me. Every time I offered to help, Melissa had already handled it. Every time I suggested meeting her family, there was a schedule conflict. I met her parents exactly once before the ceremony. A brief 15-minute coffee where her mother, Patricia, looked at my calloused hands like they carried a disease, and her father was conveniently called away to a business meeting before we could exchange more than pleasantries. "He's very busy," Melissa explained with that smile of hers. "Randall Development Corporation doesn't run itself." I nodded, not wanting to cause waves. I was a retired firefighter who'd spent his second career doing construction work. I understood busy. I understood sacrifice. What I didn't understand was why my future daughter-in-law kept looking at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of her expensive shoes. The wedding itself was beautiful, held at some vineyard in Napa that cost more than I made in a year. I sat in the third row, not the front, because Melissa said the lighting was better for family photos if immediate families sat together, and apparently I wasn't immediate enough. I didn't complain. I watched my son marry the woman he loved, and I told myself that was enough. The first year of their marriage, I saw Daniel maybe 4 times. Always at restaurants Melissa chose. Always with conversations she steered. She'd talk about their vacation home in Aspen, their membership at the country club, their plans to move into a gated community where the right kind of people lived. "Dad's thinking about selling the house," Daniel mentioned once, picking at a salad that cost $40, moving somewhere smaller. "Oh?" Melissa's eyebrow arched. "Where exactly?" "Somewhere closer to you guys, maybe. So when you have kids, I could help out, be around." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut glass. "That's thoughtful," Melissa said, in a tone that suggested it was anything but. "But we're not really planning on children for a while. And honestly, Harold, don't you think you'd be happier somewhere with people your own age? There are lovely retirement communities in Arizona. Arizona. 1,000 miles away from my only son, from potential grandchildren, from the family I'd spent my entire life building." I excused myself to the bathroom and stood there for 5 minutes, staring at my reflection. 62 years old, gray hair, weathered face, hands that had pulled bodies from burning buildings, that had built houses from the ground up, that had held my dying wife's fingers until she took her last breath, that had changed every diaper and wiped every tear from my son's face. Those hands weren't good enough for Melissa's world. When I came back to the table, Daniel was looking at his phone, and Melissa was smiling like the cat who'd caught the canary. The pregnancy announcement came on a random Tuesday. Daniel called, breathless with excitement. "Dad, you're going to be a grandfather." I dropped the wrench I was holding. It clattered against the concrete floor of my garage, but I barely heard it. A grandfather. After everything, after all those years of hoping and waiting and praying, I was going to be a grandfather. Son, that's the best news I've ever heard. Melissa's parents are throwing a party this Saturday. The big announcement, you know? They want to make it special. I'll be there. Wild horses couldn't keep me away. Dad? Daniel's voice softened. I'm really glad. I know things have been complicated, but this baby is going to change everything. You'll see. I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to believe him. I spent that week preparing. I bought a new suit, the nicest one I could afford on my pension. I wrote a speech for my grandchild, words I'd been carrying in my heart for years. I even found a beautiful silver rattle that had belonged to Daniel when he was a baby, polished it until it gleamed, ready to pass it down to the next generation. The Randall estate sat on a hill overlooking the Pacific Ocean. 17,000 square feet of Italian marble, imported chandeliers, and staff in white uniforms carrying trays of champagne that cost more than my truck payment. I pulled up in my 15-year-old Chevy, feeling like a trespasser in someone else's fairy tale. A valet looked at my vehicle with barely concealed disdain. "Sir, the service entrance is around back." "I'm a guest," I said quietly. "Harold Morrison. I'm the grandfather." His expression shifted, but not much. "Of course. Right this way." The party was already in full swing when I entered. Crystal and diamonds everywhere I looked. Women in gowns, men in suits that cost more than houses. I recognized Daniel across the room, my handsome boy in his element now, schmoozing with men who probably managed hedge funds and owned small countries. Melissa spotted me before I could reach him. She glided over in a dress that probably cost more than my annual grocery budget, her smile painted on like porcelain. "Harold, you came. I wouldn't miss this for the world." "How?" "Dedicated." She glanced at my suit, and something flickered in her eyes. "We have a lovely table set up for you. Over there." She gestured toward the back of the room, near the kitchen entrance, where a small table sat alone, separated from the rest of the party. "That's quite far from the family," I observed. "It's the best spot, really. Away from all the noise. You'll be more comfortable there." Her smile never wavered. "With your hearing issues and all." "I don't have hearing issues." But I didn't say that. I walked to my assigned seat like a man walking to his own execution, passing tables of people who didn't look at me, who didn't notice the father of the groom, the soon-to-be grandfather, being tucked away like an embarrassing secret. I sat there for an hour, watching, waiting. Daniel was pulled in 100 directions, always by Melissa, always away from where I sat. Every time he looked my way, she appeared with someone new to introduce him to, some important connection, some essential conversation. Finally, when the main event began, when Melissa's father stood at the podium to make the official announcement, I made my way toward the front. I had my speech in my pocket. I had the silver rattle in my jacket. I had words for my grandchild that I'd written and rewritten until they said everything my heart needed to say. Melissa's father, Randall Sr., made a beautiful speech about legacy and family and the Randall dynasty continuing. Then Melissa spoke, glowing and gracious, thanking everyone who mattered. She never mentioned me. When she finished, I stepped forward. If I could say a few words. Melissa's hand closed around the microphone like a viper striking. Her eyes met mine, and in them I saw nothing but cold contempt. "Harold, we have a program." "I know. But as Daniel's father," I thought. "You thought?" Her voice rose, loud enough for nearby guests to turn and stare. "What exactly did you think? That you could just walk up here and make this about you?" "I just wanted to welcome my grandchild." "Your grandchild?" She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "This baby doesn't need someone like you in its life. Look at you, Harold. Look at where you come from. What could you possibly offer my child? Stories about blue-collar work? Lessons in mediocrity?" The room went silent. 200 people, frozen, champagne glasses halfway to lips, watching the scene unfold. "Melissa," Daniel started, stepping forward, his face pale. "No, Daniel. Someone has to say it." She turned back to me, her voice carrying across the marble floors. We've tolerated your presence out of politeness, but enough is enough. This child will have everything. The best schools, the best opportunities, the best people around them. And frankly, Harold, you don't fit that picture. I stood there, clutching my speech, feeling every eye in the room burning into me. 63 years of life, of service, of sacrifice, reduced to this moment. A man being told he wasn't good enough to love his own grandchild. What do you have to offer? Melissa continued, her voice dripping with venom. A dirty garage, a pension, calloused hands, and old war stories no one wants to hear. My child will never sit in that pathetic little house of yours. They will never... Melissa. A voice cut through the room like a blade. I turned toward the entrance, where a figure stood silhouetted against the fading California sunset. Randall Sr. had gone pale. His wife dropped her champagne glass, crystal shattering against marble. A man walked forward, tall despite his 70 years, silver-haired and immaculately dressed. I hadn't seen him earlier in the crowd. He must have arrived late, must have entered through the side door, must have heard every word his daughter had just said. But that wasn't why my heart stopped. I knew this man. I knew him from another lifetime, from flames and smoke and screaming and a night I'd never forget. Dear God, he whispered, his voice carrying in the stunned silence. Captain Morrison? The name hit the room like a thunderclap. Melissa's face drained of color. Daddy? You know him? Randall Sr. stood frozen, but the older man, the one Melissa called Daddy, walked directly toward me. His eyes were wet. His hands were shaking. It's you, he breathed. After all these years, it's really you. I found my voice. Richard? Richard Hartley? He nodded, then did something that made 200 wealthy guests gasp in unison. He dropped to his knees in front of me. Daddy! Melissa shrieked. What are you doing? Richard looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. This man, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, is the reason I'm alive. The reason you exist. The reason any of this exists. The room erupted in confused murmurs. Melissa staggered backward like she'd been slapped. Richard Hartley rose slowly, keeping his hand on my arm like I might disappear if he let go. He turned to face the crowd, to face his daughter, to face the wreckage of what she'd just done. 31 years ago, he began, his voice steady despite his tears. I was 39 years old. I'd just lost everything in a market crash. Everything. My business. My investments. My first marriage. I was living in a studio apartment in Oakland, working night shifts at a warehouse to survive. Melissa's mouth opened, then closed. She'd never heard this story. None of them had. There was a fire, Richard continued. The building was old. The wiring was faulty. I woke up at 3 a.m. to smoke so thick I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. The hallway was gone, engulfed in flames. I was trapped on the 4th floor with no way out. He turned to me, and I saw the man I remembered. The man with the terrified eyes and the burned hands. The man who'd screamed that he didn't want to die. I'd given up. I was at my window, thinking about jumping because burning seemed worse. And then this man appeared. This man who'd already carried 3 people out of that building, who'd gone back in when everyone told him the structure was about to collapse, who ran up 4 flights of burning stairs because someone reported a person still trapped. Firefighter Harold Morrison, Richard said, his voice cracking. Badge number 7,714. He threw me over his shoulder and carried me down through hell itself. The stairwell collapsed 20 seconds after we cleared it. 20 seconds. The silence was absolute. Melissa had gone white as chalk. I was in the hospital for 3 months. Burns over 40% of my body. But I was alive. Richard's grip tightened on my arm. I rebuilt my life from that hospital bed. Started Randall Development with the settlement money. Married your mother 2 years later. Had you and your brother. Everything I am, everything you have, Melissa, exists because this man ran into a burning building for a stranger. He looked at his daughter with an expression I couldn't quite read. Pride, perhaps, warring with profound disappointment. I searched for him for years, Harold Morrison, but he'd moved, retired, disappeared into anonymity, like all heroes do. I hired investigators. I put out notices. I never forgot the man who gave me a second chance at life. He turned to me. I never forgot you, Captain. Not for one single day. Richard, I managed, my voice rough. I was just doing my job. You were doing more than your job. You nearly died that night. 3 surgeries for smoke inhalation. A collapsed lung. Your captain told me you were on desk duty for 6 months, and the day you were cleared, you went right back into those burning buildings. Melissa's husband, my Daniel, stepped forward. His face was a war of emotions. Dad, you never told me you were a firefighter. I looked at my son, this boy I'd raised alone, this man I'd given everything to. You never asked, son. You knew I worked construction. I didn't think the rest mattered. Didn't matter? Richard almost laughed. Harold Morrison has 3 commendations for bravery, including the Medal of Valor. He saved 17 lives in his career before retiring to raise his son alone after his wife passed. I had the investigator's report memorized by the time I gave up searching for him. Daniel turned to Melissa, his expression hardening. You knew none of this. How could I possibly? You never asked. You never asked a single question about my father beyond what he did for a living. You looked at his hands and decided he was beneath you. You looked at his house and saw a poor old man instead of a home full of love. Daniel's voice rose. You just told the man who saved your father's life that he wasn't good enough to know his grandchild. Melissa's perfect composure cracked. Daniel, I didn't know. Didn't know what? That people are more than their bank accounts? That character matters more than status? Daniel pulled his hand away from hers. My father ate ramen for 2 years so I could afford Stanford. He worked double shifts until his back gave out so I could have opportunities he never had. He gave me everything, Melissa. Everything. And you treated him like garbage. I'm sorry, Sorry? Daniel shook his head slowly. 6 months ago, you suggested my father move to Arizona so we wouldn't have to see him. Last month, you told me it would be awkward to invite him to your sister's engagement party. Tonight, you publicly humiliated him in front of 200 people. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. I've been making excuses for you for 2 years, telling myself you'd warm up to him, that you were just nervous, that you didn't mean the things you said, but you did mean them. Every single word. Daniel, please. I need some time to think. He walked past her, past the stunned crowd, past the tables laden with food no one was eating anymore. At the doorway, he stopped and looked back at me. Dad, will you come with me? I looked at Richard, at the man I'd carried out of flames 3 decades ago. He nodded, his eyes still wet. Go, he said. Take care of your boy. That's what fathers do. I walked to my son's side, leaving behind the champagne and the crystal and the woman who'd tried to erase me from existence. Behind us, I heard Richard's voice, cold and firm. Melissa, you and I need to have a very long conversation. And then you're going to apologize to that man. Properly, publicly, for every single thing you've ever said or done to him. Because if it weren't for Harold Morrison, you wouldn't be alive to make these mistakes. The California sunset painted the sky orange and pink as Daniel and I walked to my old Chevy. My son, my brilliant, successful, broken-hearted son, looked at the truck I'd driven since he was a teenager. God, Dad, I remember this truck. You taught me to drive in this truck. Still runs like a dream. Some things are worth holding on to. He broke down then, leaning against the hood, shoulders shaking with sobs he'd probably been holding in for years. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. For letting her treat you like that. For not standing up for you. For forgetting where I came from. I put my arms around him. This man who'd once been a small boy terrified of thunderstorms, who'd cried for his mother in the night, who'd made me promise never to leave him. You didn't forget, son. You just got lost for a while. We all get lost sometimes. How do you do it? He whispered. How do you stay so good? I thought about his mother, about promises made in hospital rooms and kept through decades of hard work and harder choices. I thought about burning buildings and second chances and the strange ways life circles back on itself. Your grandmother used to say that how we treat people when they can't do anything for us shows who we really are. I just try to remember that. Every day. Daniel pulled back, wiping his face. I don't know what happens next. With Melissa, with the baby, with any of it. Whatever happens, you face it with integrity. That's all any of us can do. He looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in years. Dad, tell me about being a firefighter. Tell me everything I should have asked about years ago. I smiled, feeling a weight lift from my chest that I hadn't even known I was carrying. "Get in the truck, son. I'll tell you on the way home." Home? My home. The one you grew up in. I think it's time you remembered what that looks like. As I drove us away from the Randall estate, away from the wealth and the pretense and the woman who'd tried to convince my son that I didn't matter, I saw another car pulling up. Richard Hartley, getting out, walking toward the house with purpose. He caught my eye through the window and raised his hand. Not a wave, a salute. I nodded back, one old man to another. Two lives forever intertwined by a single night of fire and courage. In a world full of stories about betrayal, what happened at that party taught me that character isn't built in comfortable moments. It's forged in moments of humiliation. When Melissa grabbed that microphone, she revealed more about herself than she ever did about me. God has a way of using our enemies' actions to show our true worth. The most powerful stories about redemption aren't found in history books. They're lived in small garages and quiet sacrifices and moments of courage that no one sees. My journey from that marble floor to reconciliation with my son reminds me that the Lord sees every act of service, every tear shed for family, every dollar stretched to make dreams possible. What makes these stories so compelling is watching how people respond when their character is tested. Daniel had to choose between the gilded life Melissa offered and the authentic love I'd always provided. Sometimes God allows us to be knocked down so we can see who truly helps us rise. True wealth isn't measured in stock portfolios or designer clothes. It's measured in the lives we touch and the values we pass down. My legacy wasn't built in boardrooms. It was built in moments when I chose my son's well-being over my own comfort, trusting that faithfulness would be honored. Real nobility comes from noble actions, not noble birth. Did my journey of resilience and redemption inspire you to reflect on your own family bonds? Leave a comment sharing what this story meant to you. Your thoughts might encourage someone else facing similar challenges. Subscribe to join our community of storytellers and share this powerful reminder that love and truth will always triumph over pride and pretense.